Welcome to the Ironic Fairy Tales channel. The main mission of this channel is to relax your spirit and open your mind to the stories. Don't worry if you feel confused, sad, or even angry about the content of the stories. It's all normal. I'm your host, Anne, and today we're going to tell a story about mankind's united fight against the bugs. Palestine was once a vast region, and Gaza City was once a glorious city. After the Second Earth Crisis, the Palestinians were ready to build a state out of the ruins. But in late 1947, earth-shattering earthquakes split the land. Magma tumbled out of the fissures, huge columns of black smoke enveloped the area around Gaza City, and something truly terrifying had awakened deep within the fissures. The bugs. Humanity has paid a terrible price to defeat the bugs, and almost an entire generation has been lost to all countries in the world. Eventually, the swarm of bugs was repelled by the nations of the world and sealed deep underground. But today, they have resurfaced in the Earth's weakest position. Crawling bugs all over the hills, winged bugs cover the sky, their forelimbs as sharp as knives, able to cut through human bodies with just one swing. Their armor was as hard as rock, swords and axes did them no harm. Some soldiers even emptied their entire magazine of bullets, but still couldn't kill a single bug. They used human blood as drink and human flesh as food. Just in 2 years, 5 counterattacks by Middle Eastern coalition forces have failed. No army on Middle Eastern soil was a match for this swarm of bugs. The remaining Arabs had no choice but to leave this area. The Palestinians in Gaza knew they could not resist the bugs alone, so they fought and retreated into the underground. They built walls of mud and blocked all the exits with bricks, and after years of fortification, the underground shelters were as strong as fortresses. Since then, the Palestinians in Gaza have been completely cut off from the outside world. Humans were originally a species that lived on the ground, but they were cornered by the bugs that lived underground. It's ridiculous. Hopefully, other countries will get rid of the bug swarms sooner and we can return to the ground sooner. People of the underground comforted each other. Time seems to freeze underground, and the absence of outside information makes people even more anxious. After that, there were only rumors. Rumor had it that the bug swarm had spread from the Middle East to the globe, but this time, humans failed to unite to defeat the bug swarm, and bugs took over the global surface. Rumor has it that there were signs of division within the bug swarm. Perhaps we should return to the surface and reclaim our homeland. Such a proposal would of course be rejected by the parliament. But as time went on, there were always some people who could not stand the pressure and fear, and they disappear after dug through the wall. The number of such people grew and grew as time went on. Until around 1994, the crowd finally could not stand the underground life any longer. They gathered in front of the parliament to protest and demand to return to the ground. The protesting crowd even shouted this slogan, "Better to die on the ground than to live underground." From their slogans, you may be able to feel how desperate their lives were. After a while, the Supreme Consul had appeared on the high platform, a thin old man whose lumbar spine had been deformed by years of underground life. He was on crutches in one hand and reached into his arms with the other. When the crowd below saw the consul appear, they soon stopped chanting slogans because they knew the consul was about to say something. The consul took out a Quran from his arms and placed it on his chest. After a long silence, the protesters finally heard the famous historic statement, "I have heard your cry. You will not die on the ground. You will take off from the ground and soar in the air. Go, my children, leave." 30 years later, historians have interpreted this statement as a prophecy of a prophet, rather than a performance of surrender in the face of an angry crowd because he did succeed in his prophecy. In an instant, the crowd erupted in thunderous cheers, which shook the walls with dust, and then the crowd rushed towards the exit on the ground. Soldiers originally planned to maintain order and release the crowd one by one to go outside to inquire for information, so that even if the outside was still very dangerous, they could minimize the loss of personnel. But at this time, the crowd was already restless. The ground surface was right in front of them. The sunshine and fresh air had already hooked the crowd's heartstrings. As soon as the soldiers cleared the passage to the outside world, the crowd was already running uncontrollably towards the exit. And when they reached the ground, the scene in front of them shocked the crowd speechless. Where were those crawling bugs? And where were the flying winged bugs? How come none of them were there? Did we win the war? The memories of the past came to mind. The ruins of Gaza City were still the same as they once were, with one side by the sea and 3 sides by the land. The land side should have been an endless desert plain, but now there was a long row of white giant walls. Even from a distance, one could feel the enormity and length of the wall. What the hell is going on? Was the bugs been defeated by the humans? Why is Gaza City empty and why didn't anyone inform us? And what's going on with this giant wall? They couldn't imagine what had happened during these decades. All they could do was walk towards the giant wall. As the crowd approached the giant wall, they finally met the same species again after decades. Humans. This news made the crowd ecstatic. These strangers carrying rifles and wearing green body armor, wandering in groups at the top and below the giant wall, they should be soldiers patrolling and standing guard. These green soldiers were not surprised to see the crowd, but the Palestinians were overexcited that they immediately came forward to hug the same species. Fortunately, the green soldiers didn't raise their guns to threaten the crowd. They just reminded the crowd to keep a safe distance before communicating. After the crowd calmed down, the green soldiers brought in a spokesman to answer their questions, and the Palestinians learned what had happened in the past few decades. During these decades, there have been warriors in all countries who have tried to reclaim ground territory, but they all failed without exception. Only we Israelis, have succeeded. After fending off wave after wave of bugs attacks, they finally retreated. We took advantage of the brief window of time in which the bugs were repelled to build the wall. Since then, the battles have been endless. The bugs have gathered more and more. The giant wall grew higher, farther, and deeper into the ground. The foundation of the giant wall was so deep that the burrowing bugs were discouraged. The giant wall was so high that even the winged bugs can't climb over it. The defensive strategy of the giant wall worked. Our survival strategy naturally revolves around giant wall, such as digging out a city in the middle of the thick wall. After that, the sandwich city in the center of the giant wall is the living area, and the top of the giant wall is the combat area. Until the wall was built into the Mediterranean Sea, we were able to relax our nerves a little bit because we surrounded a whole open space by building the wall. And finally, we didn't have to be surrounded by enemies on all sides anymore. And this open space is exactly where you are, the ruins of Gaza City. The Palestinians listened attentively. As they listened, they looked towards the wall. The giant wall was so high and thick that it would have been impossible for a human being to climb from the outer wall to the top or to penetrate it at the bottom. At the end of the Israeli speaker's presentation, there was applause among the Palestinians who thanked the Israelis for their selfless sharing of information. Of course, there were some people have expressed doubts such as, "Why don't you guys live in Gaza City if there's no bugs here?" Such as, "What's going on outside the walls? Have you contacted other countries?" As soon as the first question was asked, there was a burst of laughter from the crowd, because it was a stupid question, and many people had already thought of the answer, and the Israeli spokesman also answered what most people thought. Who knows how big the difference is in bugs? Gaza City is safe today, but who can guarantee that it will be safe tomorrow? On the second question, the Israeli spokesman said slowly, "This is a heavy question, and I have a heavy answer. We have never contacted any country or organization or individual, and we have never given up contact, but there is no news. There is nothing but bugs outside the walls. We Israelis no longer believe that human civilization remains outside the wall. We are the last human beings, and you Palestinians are really the luckiest people. You just happen to show up inside the wall, and the Israelis just happen to be your guardians. Of course, there are some small questions, such as, we've been underground for years. How do you prove that what you say is true? And, the topography of Gaza City has basically not changed. Where did you dig up the stone to build the walls? And, a few years ago, many Palestinians fled underground shelter. Where are they now? The Israeli spokesman did not answer questions like this because of the small number of people who asked them. Then, the Israeli spokesman suddenly raised his voice. So, it's time to tell you the rules of life here, and you have to listen carefully to what I'm going to say next. Some of you may not like these rules, but I want to assure you that as long as you follow the rules, we can live in harmony, and the Israelis will continue to protect you from the bugs. However, if you break the rules, then we can always get you out of Gaza and leave you with the bugs. Rule number 1, never climb the giant wall, and no one is allowed to use flying equipment near the wall. Rule number 2, never dig tunnels, and promise never to go back underground. After a while, you will fill in all the underground passages you came out with concrete, and the concrete will be provided by us. Rule number 3, don't try to build a ship or row a boat. The monsters of the sea are more vicious than the bugs. The 4th rule is special. The population of Gaza must be controlled within 2 million. This shouldn't be hard to understand. The land in Gaza is limited, and the food grown is also limited. We Israelis live in the sandwich city inside the wall, so we won't compete with you for food. As for how to keep the population under 2 million all the time, you have to figure it out yourself, and we will not be involved. Got it? Just these 4 rules, and as long as you follow them, our 2 ethnic groups can live respectfully without disturbing each other. Silence, followed by murmuring to each other. Sure enough, there is no such thing as an act of kindness without a cause. Be content. This is much better than life underground. The Palestinians didn't respond to the speakers for a long time, and their embarrassment was difficult to hide. None of the Palestinians here have seen the world beyond the wall. Some of them are skeptical of the first 3 rules, and some are angry about the 4th. The spokesman noticed their dissatisfaction and added, in short, the purpose of these 4 rules is the same, which is to keep you safe and avoid contact with the bug. We will handle all dangerous matters. Moreover, your current numbers are still very small, and it's still early to reach the population ceiling. After all, the rest of your lives are much better than living underground. The spokesman did not wait for a response from the crowd and continued. Then, as a greeting gift, we will give you some construction tools and concrete. After the underground passage is filled, you can use the remaining tools to rebuild a Gaza city on the ruins of Gaza. Okay, the exchange is over. You can start working. After the speech, the Israeli spokesman left directly, and the soldiers piled some rusty tools in front of the crowd and told them to go to the designated place to collect the concrete. At this point, the Palestinians did not realize that they were going to do manual labor, and they froze in place, still immersed in the 4 rules. It was only after the Israelis persuaded them again and promised to provide the crowd with a working meal that the Palestinians broke free from their suspicions and began to work. But one thing is certain. From then on, the Israelites never provided any valuable information or answered the questions of the crowd. The Israeli soldier who oversaw the work replied in a surprisingly unanimous tone. The spokespersons who need to speak have already said it all. We signed a confidentiality agreement and can't answer your questions. After the acceptance of the landfill work, the soldiers did not say a word and all walked in the direction of the giant wall. The Palestinians looked at their backs and said to themselves, "Are they friend or foe? It's so inscrutable." Immediately after the Israelis left, the Palestinians began a census. It was not that they did not know the number of their people, but they suspected that not all of them have left the underground. As expected, the total number of Palestinians on the ground was 897,000. Then there are 3,000 people who have not left the underground shelter, and they still follow the Supreme Consul. What a staggering number. What? 3,000 people? That means we buried 3,000 of our countrymen alive? How about we dig up the underground tunnels again? Shouted a conscience-stricken Palestinian. What nonsense are you talking? What do you mean buried alive? We've been living underground for decades, and the surface passages were sealed to death at that time. Haven't we walked out now? Yes. As long as they want to, they can still turn over the concrete and come out on their own. Palestinians consoled themselves. Guys, let me be more realistic. 10 days have passed since we left the underground shelter and finished the work of filling tunnels. If those 3,000 people had wanted to, they would have gotten out a long time ago. And we don't have the tools that we have to do the work of turning over the concrete again. There's still the city of Gaza waiting to be rebuilt, one of the elders said. Many in the crowd expressed agreement with this sentiment. If they want to live underground, they let them live. It's not like they're going to starve or suffocate anyway. It also reduces our population burden. The crowd chimed in. So flip the concrete or rebuild Gaza City. Let's vote on that, folks, another elder said, and the people agreed. With the sound of gunfire in the distance and the blinding sandstorm, people began to vote. The answer is obvious. Rebuild Gaza City, win. It seems that most people still want to live in a house before we talk about anything else, the elders said. After all, excavation is much more difficult than landfill. After everyone has built houses, smelted iron ore, and built excavation machinery, it will not be too late to discuss this matter. The crowd reached a consensus. Later, historians have defined the vote as a turning point in the fate of Gazans. This is the only time that Palestinians have used a referendum to decide whether or not to contact their compatriots underground. As Gaza City grew larger and more populous, this bill was never mentioned again because the public opinion was clear. None of the 3,000 consul's followers had ever participated in the construction of Gaza City, yet they wanted to take up Gaza City's population quota. This is absolutely unacceptable. Besides, if we reopen the underground tunnels, then will the Israelis throw us out of the wall? Now, decades later, Gaza's history teachers lament to their students whenever they read this part in class. Alas, what a shame. If we had been braver and more united then, perhaps there would not be the never-ending suffering we have today. So, what happened to the people underground? Why don't they come out? A student asked. The teacher replied, "The people underground. Their choices are exactly the opposite of ours, and they also got a controversial ending." If you liked this story, please leave a like. It's really important for a new channel. If you want to see more ironic stories, please subscribe this channel, and we'll see you in the next story. Goodbye.